cognitive behavior. I've found cognitive behavioral therapy to be the most effective therapy for working with people who have, say, for instance, mental health issues, things like depression, anxiety, addictions, um, various kind of disturbances that are very um damaging and destructive for them. Okay, so the reason why I found CBT so effective is that it's very much focused on the here and now and behavioral change. Now, in the past, um, the man who founded CBT is a man called Dr. Aaron Beck, and he was working as a psychoanalyst and found that focusing on past, focusing on childhood, which is psychoanalysis is very much geared towards that, uh, was slow. It was tedious. And while, don't get me wrong, childhood experiences and things that happened to us in the past, traumas are very important. But really important issues need to be dealt with in the here and now. So he discovered this thing that faulty thinking, how we think about things and perceive things, is the most important aspect of bringing about change. So, for instance, um, people perceive things in a different way, right? You might get a person who has, for instance, gives a lecture to or gives a workshop to his colleagues in work. And what might happen, one person might give this lecture and have, say, 20 people at the lecture, and 19 people would say great things. This went really well. We really enjoyed it. But one person might come up at the end and say, I wasn't very impressed with that. You were very kind of slow and I didn't enjoy it. Now, the person with low self esteem might find that very, very damaging. They might focus on the one person who told them the negative thing, but it would cause what we call catastrophic thinking, all or nothing thinking. So they might minimize all the good points and focus very much on the negative points. Okay. So what Beck discovered was that our faulty thinking is really behind a lot of our mental health issues. And what I would always try and do with my clients in CBT is to help them to bring about more rational thoughts. Now, irrational thoughts are subconscious, they're coming from deep inside ourselves. So, if you have a belief about yourself which is rooted in negativity, the irrational thoughts can bubble up into thinking that is not based on reality. Okay, so irrational thoughts tend to be not based on reality. Rational thoughts are based on reality. So, what I would always be trying to do with my clients is to help them to bring about rational thinking rather than irrational thinking, because irrational thinking can usually lead to faulty emotions, very negative emotions, and very destructive behaviors. Okay, so that's kind of like where I'm coming from with CBT. So how this can transfer then into working with children and in the classroom. And it's from my lectures, really, from training people, that I discovered that a lot of teachers were coming to me in the training and saying that I find this really helpful in working with children. So what I want to do is I'm just going to share my screen with you. If you give me 1 second, and I will try and take you through a few slides that will hopefully help you to, let me see, I just want to present this to hopefully present you to kind of give you an impression of how CBT can work in the classroom setting. Okay, so as I say, CBT is very structured. It's goal orientated. It's focused on behavioral change. I always remember I was manager of an addiction treatment center for years, and what I found was that awareness alone does not equal behavioral change. We had a guy who came to us for treatment. He was about 40 years of age. He was a relapsed heroin addict. And what amazed me was that he knew everything about therapy, right? So knowing everything about therapy and having all this awareness was not stopping him from taking drugs. So that's why I'm very much a believer in having goals and and my therapy is geared towards change. We can go around talking circles about our childhood. We can blame people. We can find that, look for all the reasons why our lives are so bad. We're stuck in a depression, feelings of futility. I can't change. But what I'm trying to do with my clients is to constantly work with them to bring about change in their behavior. So it's very focused on identifying and changing unhelpful thought patterns. It links thoughts, I'll get to that in a second, emotions and behaviors, aiming to improve emotional well being and behavior. And through CBT, people learn to recognize and reshape negative thought patterns, which will bring about behavioral change. Okay. Now you can actually ask me any questions as we're going along. This is going to be about a 45-minute lecture. And what we can do at the end is take questions, or if you want to just pop a question into the little chat facility there, I can actually address them as we're moving forward. So this is Beck's seminal piece of work. Okay. And it's called the cognitive triangle. And um, this is about everyone. This is about me. It's about you. It's about how we all function. So it's really very much geared towards how our thoughts affect our feelings, which lead to a behavior. So negative thoughts can lead to very down, depressed feelings, which lead to behaviors such as isolation, maybe procrastination, maybe kind of wanting to just not do anything. So, leading to depression. So, thoughts, and I'll explain in a minute a little bit about how that works. This is the central concept of CBT. And in the middle, right in the middle, I don't say it there, but what we call the triggering event. So something will trigger in us, in the person who is experiencing mental health issues. A trigger will happen which will set off the thoughts, set off the feelings, and set off the behavior. So I'm going to try and explain. As I say, this is a 3-year master's degree uh, in the area of CBT. So I'm trying to cover a lot in this particular lecture. So this is the central concept that Beck came up with, and it's really what CBT is based on. Now, an example would be in a school setting. A little boy, Jamie, he has a maths test tomorrow, and he doesn't feel confident with maths, so he's struggling. He feels anxious when there's a test. Okay, so that's the anxiety. All right, that's the emotion. Now, Jamie thinks, I'm terrible at maths. I'm going to fail this test. So his thoughts are, if you can see how that thoughts then will affect how he's thinking. Okay, this thought reinforces his belief that maths is impossible for him, increasing anxiety. So we're getting back to the cognitive triangle. Thoughts will affect the emotion. So he's now feeling very anxious. All right. So that's the thoughts and the emotions. Here we go. He feels anxious, frustrated, insecure, and these emotions create a sense of dread. about the test, leading to physical symptoms like a tight stomach and restlessness. So the thought has affected the feelings and has affected the behavior. Um, then we come to what the outcome. What we said was the thought will affect the feeling, and then the behavior will be the outcome. He avoids studying, procrastinates, and he's unable to focus. On the test day, Jamie's lack of preparation leads to a poor performance. Now, reinforcing the initial thought that I'm terrible at maths. Okay, so you can see how the thought affect the feeling and the behavior. Okay, so then we come to, sorry, just let me get a little drink here. Another major concept in CBT is our core belief. Now, again, this is not just about Jamie. It's not about people with very, very, issues around mental health issues. This is about me. It's about you. We all have core beliefs, how we feel about ourselves deep down. A core belief could be for somebody who is, for instance, finding it difficult to have relationships. When I work with that person to go down deep into their core belief, you might get a core belief of I'm unlovable, which could come from a past experiences with parents, with teachers, a feeling of I'm unlovable. Another core belief would be I'm unworthy. I'm a failure. Deep rooted. We might not even be aware of them. A lot of times, our core beliefs can be so deep rooted that we don't know what they are, but we're operating from them. Okay, and that's why core beliefs are a very central part of cognitive behavioral therapy. So, Jamie's core belief might be deep-seated ideas about his own abilities and self-worth, particularly related to academic performance. Now, here are a few possible core beliefs, especially in challenging subjects like maths. So this is how his core beliefs could manifest. Okay, I'm not smart enough. Yeah. He may have an underlying belief that he lacks the intelligence to succeed academically, especially in challenging subjects like maths. So deep down, he feels I'm not smart enough. That's core belief. I'm a failure if I don't do well. He might equate academic struggles with personal failure, believing his self-worth depends on doing well. Now, that can come from uh, parental influence, from peer pressure. These things stem from something. But what I'm trying to do as a psychotherapist with working with people with core beliefs is to help them identify them, um, maybe to find out where they're coming from, but then how they might develop their core belief and deal with it, and improve on the core belief, because not all core beliefs are negative. Some of them can be very positive. So another core belief you might have is mistakes are bad. I shouldn't make them. You find a lot of people with negative core beliefs, low self-esteem, are making should statements. Um, and this can lead to perfectionism, where Jamie feels anxious about any mistakes. And this reinforces avoidance behaviors. So again, this is how he starts to avoid studying. He starts acting out. He starts to feel that I'm not, I can never do this. So this is where the core belief will be very important to help him understand that. And then others are better than me, comparing himself to peers who may excel in maths would reinforce a belief of inferiority and inadequacy. Okay, so again, I just want to bring maybe this little bit of back to ourselves as adults. We all have these, we all have these negative core beliefs. Not some people obviously don't have them as extreme as others. Most people coming from mental health issues will have very deep-rooted core beliefs instilled by parents, by teachers, by peers, maybe as they get older by bosses and work. So no harm reflecting on in this particular webinar, maybe reflect a little bit on your own core beliefs. How do I feel about myself deep down? Are my core beliefs holding me back? Uh, what can I do to actually identify them and bring about some change? Because that's the important part. So these beliefs now, they create a reinforcing cycle where the negative thoughts about his insecurities causing emotional stress and avoidance behaviors. Over time, these patterns can solidify, you know, and this is what happens with children when uh, they're reinforced by maybe adults, teachers, uh, peers. Again, they become very solid and making academic challenges seem even more insurmountable. Um, Now, what I would do as a therapist would be to work to help, and this is what teachers can do as well, help to identify and address the core beliefs, helping Jamie develop a more realistic and growth orientated view of his abilities. A big task now. I mean, we're talking about a 10-year-old child, and that's something I'm going to touch in a minute, is how the limitations of teachers being able to kind of do this, but we'll come to that in a minute. But that's the goal of CBT, is to help people to identify their core beliefs, identify their negative thinking, and thereby bring about positive thoughts, more reasonable, rational, and more productive thoughts. Okay, so how does CBT work? Cognitive restructuring helps identify irrational or negative thoughts and replace them with more balanced, constructive ones. That's a big kind of concept, the whole idea of cognitive restructuring. So, as a therapist, what I am trying to do is to restructure the thinking. If the thinking has been reinforced, it can be changed. What we learn can be unlearned. So, what I will try and do is to ask, for instance, the child or the adult to work out, okay, for instance, if it's a catastrophic thought, I am useless, I am a failure, I am no good for nothing, is to try and get them to explore the evidence for that particular thought. So bringing about a more balanced, like actually asking, well, or highlighting that maybe they're good at one thing. You're good at a certain thing. It doesn't mean that you're bad at everything. So you can see what I'm saying about irrational thoughts. They become all or nothing. They become catastrophic. They're very extreme thinking, which leads to very extreme emotions, very extreme behaviors. So as a therapist, I'm trying to bring the rational. Let's look at the rational part of this. That's really what cognitive restructuring is, helping them to balance out the real with what's not real. So it's, again, I want to highlight the fact that that's quite an advanced technique to be able to do with people. But I want to kind of give you a flavor of what a CBT therapist would do. So the key techniques in CBT include thought journaling. Again, maybe with a 10-year-old, you wouldn't be asking them to write a thought journal, but you might be able to do it in a more kind of fun game style orientated. Behavioral activation, which is, again, for instance, maybe getting the 10-year-old Jamie to try a very short, very small little test in maths, to get him to bring back. So behavioral activation is really when people are avoiding their what they need to do in life, and put it in plain man's terms, and to encourage them to start with small little steps, which will build their self-esteem and help them to grow. Exposure is, again, exposure would be to bring them to ask him if he wants, say, for instance, if he was avoiding any maths exam, to test, to try and test it. You'd be encouraging him to test going into the exam and just trying it. So exposure therapy for adults would be, for instance, if somebody had a phobia, you would be asking them to you'd be exposing them to small little things they had the phobia about, so they become more and more used to it. And obviously, problem solving techniques, which is a very healthy way of helping people to work out problems, to solve their problems. So CBT is effective in addressing disruptive and compulsive behaviors in children. In a school setting, CBT techniques can be adapted to help students understand and manage their thoughts, emotions, and behaviors, which promotes a positive and supportive learning environment. That's one of the benefits. Disruptive behaviors in children can stem from various sources, including emotional dysregulation, anxiety, or difficulties with impulse control. I don't know if there's any teachers here today, but certainly that's one of the big issues. I think we'd be trying to work with the children around managing their impulses. The benefits of CBT for students, when it's effectively done, it improves emotional regulation. It teaches the child or the student to identify and manage their own behaviors, reducing compulsive behaviors and emotional outbursts, which is really, really powerful. When a child or a teenager or an adult starts to get the insight that they can manage their behavior, that they can manage their thoughts, which will help them to manage their feelings and their behaviors. Very, very effective in our own lives. Everybody can do it. I mean, this is really, really. I mean, people, you're probably doing this anyway. A lot of people are probably doing this. I'm just trying to put a CBT context on this for you. Um, The next one would be to enhance problem solving skills. It gives students strategies to handle conflicts and challenges, uh, bringing about a proactive rather than reactive approach. So being able to become aware of the thought. So before the thought explodes in their head, where it becomes a very extreme, they can actually start to rationalize and bring the thought into more, as I said earlier, a more rational context. So that's one of the other benefits. It enhances problem solving skills. Um, Self-awareness. Uh, we can all do more with self-awareness, reflecting on thoughts and behaviors, being able to identify, well, this thought is not real, being able to understand how it's affecting their behavior, promoting self-understanding and bringing about personal growth, which is what we're all looking for. Personal growth is vitally important. And it promotes positive behavior. It reinforces desirable behaviors through structured interventions like positive reinforcement. Again, I'm sure if you're teachers or if you're working with children, you're doing this anyway, reinforcing positive behaviors, encouraging them, making behavioral contracts, getting them to come up with their own. I always believe that, asking self-evaluation questions are really important with children. It's a little bit harder work to do. In CBT, it's called Socratic questionings, getting them to work out themselves uh, and name it. So there's a great theory saying in therapy is that people believe what they hear themselves saying. When I'm working with a client and I can say to them, for instance, if they've got an addiction, you need to stop using drink, stop drinking. But what my goal will be with the person is to get them to tell me that they need to stop drinking. So that's what's called Socratic questioning, having a series of questions where the child or the person you're dealing with is getting them to tell you what they need to do to change. Okay. So promoting behavioral contracts, positive reinforcement, these are very important. So it provides clear. Now, this is the other great thing about CBT. It's evidence-based, you know. Um, it's so much research done into CBT. And that's what's so reassuring for me because I know that what I'm doing with people is effective. Now, I believe that basically the reason why CBT has been so heavily researched and so positively researched is that behavioral change is measurable. You know, a lot of therapies in the past were very talking based, emotional catharsis. I did it myself. I mean, I worked as a humanistic therapist for a good few years, and I found that you're going around in circles with people. They're coming in, they're talking about their feelings, they're weeping, they're very down in themselves. They might feel some better after some emotional catharsis, but behavioral change may be not happening. They might still be depressed. They might still be in a destructive relationship. They might be finding it difficult to change their lives. So CBT is measurable because we're looking at how people are improving. And you can do that in certain ways. So that's why it's so heavily researched and so evidence-based. Okay. It obviously makes classroom management more predictable and consistent. As I say, if you have any questions for me, just stick them in the chat there, and I'll try and answer them. It enhances student-teacher relationships and encourages positive interactions. It's very collaborative. CBT is a very collaborative model of therapy, which gives the client or the child a sense of autonomy, a feeling that they're involved in their own process, in their own behavioral change, and gives them ownership of it. Which again, when we come back to adults, collaboration is vitally important, that we need to be very, very collaborative with our clients and with the child to get them to name what they need to do to change themselves. So it builds trust and mutual respect. Okay. Um, so some of the CBT techniques that can be effective for managing disruptive behaviors in children. Um, Thought stopping, teaching them that when a negative thought comes in, they don't have to believe that thought. Giving them it, we call this in therapy psychoeducation, educating the child about their own thoughts and their own feelings and behavior. I do that with my own children. My wife does it as well. So I'm kind of developing emotional intelligence, giving them that insight into you don't have to react on that thought, giving them the idea that they have control over their thoughts and that they don't have to explode. And that's the ideal now. Again, I'm not saying any of this is easy. I'm not saying it's one size fits all. It takes time, it does take time, but it's certainly important to help them to stop the thought, thought stopping. It interrupts the negative or disruptive thought patterns before they lead to problematic behavior. First, you've got to teach them about where the thoughts are coming from. So it would be, for instance, teach students to recognize the thought. For instance, the thought might be, this is too hard, I'm going to fail. And for them to be able to say to themselves, stop, you know, to actually stop that thought and replace the thought with a more positive or neutral one, such as, I can ask for help if I don't understand. So being able to give them the tools and the insight, the skills, and the tools to be able to help them to support themselves. When the thoughts are becoming negative, they stop the thought and reach out for support. Um, Self-monitoring, it helps students to track their own behavior. This is what I was saying earlier, to get a good sense of their own self-awareness and become aware of their actions and patterns. Getting them to name them, though, it's very easy for us to say, you should stop that. You're causing this behavior, pointing the finger. Look, I'm doing that. This would point the finger, and instead of asking them, how do you feel about this behavior? What do you think this behavior you're using is impacting on other people? These kind of questioning and getting them to name them takes time. I'm not saying it doesn't. People, I'm going to come to that in a minute. Some of the limitations of CBT. Just 1 second, please. So, an application of self-monitoring, use a very simple chart to show the student where they can record their behavior throughout the day. And this would be for kids who are maybe on the extreme end. So you'd be kind of asking them to do interventions like this, marking if they follow class rules or control their temper. You're asking them to actually write down, which is a big undertaking, and not every child wants to do that. And it's not always realistic. And then, of course, you can sit down and review the chart together to discuss the successes and areas for improvement. Now, positive self-talk, we could all do with that, replacing negative self-statement with positive affirmations to boost their confidence and reduce disruptive reactions. Again, big undertaking, but the goal ultimately is to develop that kind of heightened self-awareness of their negative thinking and to develop some emotional intelligence in how they manage their emotions. So the positive self-talk, instead of saying, the negative thing, I can handle this, it's okay to make mistakes. I'm learning and getting better. Encourage them to use these statements when they feel frustrated or upset. Self-compassion, it's a very big word now in the self-help world. Allowing them to feel some form of self-compassion, building their own self-esteem within themselves instead of the very harsh critic. You find that a lot with children when they've been kind of influenced by negativity, by maybe a critical parent, a critical teacher, critical people in their lives. They internalize that critic and become very, very critical of themselves. So what I'm trying to do, working with adults in particular, because that's my main focus of work, is just to become aware of the internal critic and to soothe themselves with more positive, more kind of affirming, self-soothing thoughts. And I'd encourage you to do that as well. I'm sure maybe you do that already. It's very common now. So again, we mentioned cognitive restructuring, help them to identify and change unhelpful thoughts that lead to disruptive behavior. Um, when a student expresses a negative belief, nobody likes me, again, all or nothing thinking, help them examine the evidence for that thought against and come up with a more balanced view. Some people may not be friendly, but there maybe are people who like you, so getting them to name one or two people that do like them. So you're kind of bringing that all or nothing thinking into some more rational a place where they can actually see that, okay, that's a very extreme thought. There are maybe two people who like me. So again, that's the whole idea of CBT, is to balance, is to ask the person to provide evidence for the all or nothing thinking, because usually catastrophic thinking is not based on reality. The worst thing that can happen is probably not going to happen. And if you can get children to think like that at a very early age, it's very powerful. So this is the ABC model: the antecedent, the behavior, and the consequence. So an antecedent is a trigger. So something that is triggering the actual behavior and then the consequence. Um, so the purpose of it is to identify the trigger and the consequences of disruptive behavior to inform better responses. Um, you work with the student to identify the trigger, what happened before the behavior, what was leading up to it, what was the behavior. Like for instance, something happened, somebody said something that was hurtful, I lashed out, which was the behavior, and then the consequence, what happened after the behavior. Get them again to see how their behavior is working, so they become a lot more aware of themselves. They can see the trigger, And so you get a lot of this. It's very helpful with anger, people with children with anger issues. If you can develop the rapport with them, develop that relationship with them where they kind of taken in what you're saying, which is vitally important. You've got to have a lot of trust. You got to have a lot of deep, kind of a very good relationship with the child, so that they're going to be able to take this on. And then discuss the consequences, and then looking at what else could they have done differently. Um, I'm sure you've heard of mindfulness, right? It's a really nice mindfulness exercise that I would always try and teach my own children in my own life, but certainly my clients and teachers to actually use this method. So what you find with people who are experiencing distress and anxiety, a lot of the times they will be very unfocused. It's very thinking that's all over the place, chaotic thinking. So the whole idea of mindfulness, as you probably know, is to center yourself, bring yourself into the here and now, become aware of your surroundings, become more relaxed in yourself. So a nice method is the 5-4-3-2-1 method. And it's particularly useful, yeah, for managing anxiety, which all mindfulness is, distress or impulsive behavior. I'll just explain it to you, how it works. It guides kids to focus on their surroundings and their body using their five senses: light, touch, hearing, smell, and taste. It distracts them from the overwhelming emotions. So if we're not, if we're focused so much on all these bubbling up emotions and anxiety and fear, it tends to just completely blow our minds, right? In all of us as humans and adults, this is what happens. So what you're trying to do is to get the child to center, become more focused. And here's the technique. So ask the child to look around and name five things they can see. So I can see the blind, I can see the light, I can see this microphone, I can see a bottle of water. So I have now taken my focus off all these emotions, and I'm now focusing on the things I can see. Encourage them to take their time and notice the details. Like, what color is the microphone? It's black. Bringing the mind into focus. So yeah, that's things you can see, things you can touch. Have them focus on four things they can physically feel. Can you feel your clothes? You feel the chair. So again, the thoughts, you're bringing their feelings, the coolness of the desk. You're encouraging them to describe the sensation. Describe that, what you're feeling. If you're feeling this, your sweater is what's that fabric like? So again, the goal is taking the mind off that chaotic thought, chaotic emotions, bringing them into a center. The next one would be uh, things they can hear. What sounds? Can you hear the ticking of a clock? Can you hear the air conditioning, birds chirping outside? Bringing them into the senses of their hearing. And it tunes into the auditory environment and focuses on subtle sounds that they might usually overlook. Um, Things they can smell, again, a sense. Um, Bringing everything into the here and now, you know, bringing the smell, sense of smell into the here and now helps them to relax. Again, these are the kind of things you can use: scented objects, orange peel, lavenders. So yeah, so the taste, all the senses. Again, the whole theory is to bring them into the here and now, so that they're, and we all do it. I mean, if you find, I don't know if you do meditation or mindfulness, I find myself, I will have my own techniques to bring myself out of the chaos of the thinking of the mind, into the more present, into the here and now. And children react beautifully to this. I do it with my own children, and at the start they think it's crazy and they don't want to do it, but as they get a little bit older, they really find the benefits. So the benefits are: reduces stress, improves concentration, and promotes emotion regulation. I mean, If there's anything that's more important in us all, and especially in children, is the ability to regulate our own emotions. I always find that emotional maturity is really related to the ability to tolerate distress. You know, and you find that people who can't tolerate any kind of negative emotions are usually the ones that are more dysfunctional. The more we're able to tolerate our own emotions, tolerate discomfort, distressful emotions, and the more effective and the more well-being we're going to have in life. Now, we're not going to be swinging from one emotion to the next, that we're more able to regulate our emotions. Okay, so here's the limitations. Okay, so I've given some great insight into how powerful CBT is, and it is, and some of the limitations that I want to acknowledge, because that's important as well. The limitations are time constraints. I don't know if people out there listening to this are teachers, and you might be saying, "Oh God, I've so much on. How could I even go down this road with a child?" So that's the limitation. You're balancing multiple responsibilities. So dedicating time to CBT based interventions can be challenging, and the time required for planning, delivering, and following up on CBE activities may conflict with busy schedules. But, even a small little interventions can be really, really helpful. Doesn't have to be full blown CBT. And then, of course, the training requirements. As I said, this is a 45-minute, 50-minute lecture. I'm trying to get a whole model of psychotherapy into kind of giving you that insight into this. And so the effective use requires specific training. Now, I just want to mention I am doing a training in Dubai in 2 days CBT training in December. I haven't got the exact dates, but we can send them on to you. If anybody's interested, it's 2 days training whereby I will be teaching a lot of the skills, a lot of the theories, but also we'll be doing a lot of role playing. I do a lot of role playing, a lot of case studies, looking at examples, and actually bringing the class members in to work with me and do some role plays and watch how I kind of use these interventions. Because as I say, I'm kind of providing theory now. I really like to do interactive training. I'm not very didactic in my approach. I like getting people involved, interactivity and discussions. So that's the training that's coming up in December if you're interested. So yeah, we do training. We get a lot of teachers on the courses. Um, you know, this is another important thing. The last training I did, I had two amazing teachers who came along who had incredible training working with children with very, very severe trauma issues, neurodevelopmental disorders, severe behavioral issues. This kind of CBT I'm talking about is not really equipped to deal with that. These are much more advanced uh, needs that these children have, and they require a lot more um, advanced CBT techniques, and also behavioral, different types of models of therapy as well. What I'm talking about is children who are displaying kind of mild behavioral issues, maybe anxiety issues, mild depression. Yeah, these kind of issues that children will be presenting that you'd be more equipped to deal with. But the other ones need a lot more advanced training. And the other thing then is the lack of continuity. It works best with regular structured sessions. And as I say, it's not easy for a teacher to actually build that into the daily structure. It can be difficult to maintain in a school schedule. The holidays and variability of the school calendar can disrupt the continuity needed because, you know, as I said earlier, behaviors that are learned can be unlearned, but the problem is that they can be quite entrenched. And if they're very entrenched, it needs consistent reinforcement, positive reinforcement, bringing, positive, consistent input on because we all do it. I mean, it's very hard. Sometimes it's hard to change. It's very difficult to change. That's what we can all find as adults when we get older. You know, the old saying, you can't teach an old horse new tricks. But that's why it's great to catch children with this stuff, because it can really help them as they develop in life, and to have that heightened awareness. And you as a teacher, if you are a teacher, even bringing little things into the situation where you're actually teaching the class, maybe even for a short period of time. Psychoeducation is a very, very powerful way of teaching people about their behavior and giving them insights. So lack of continuity, it does need some form of continuity to keep this thing reinforced. Um, Resources and support. School may lack resources, funding, dedicated mental health staff, um, necessary to support teachers who want to implement CBT. So without administrative support, I'm sure if you are a teacher, you understand this. It's difficult to bring this in, and it can put an extra strain on teachers. So that's really the bones of what I'm trying to get across here. As I say, if you have any questions, I would be delighted to answer them. So if you have, let me see them in the chat facility there. Um, Let me see. I'm just going to get this off. I'd stop sharing and go back. Just a second. Yeah. So if you have questions, just stick them there, and if not, we will take it from. We will leave it for today, and hopefully that you got some value from this webinar. I've covered a lot of ground. I hope I haven't covered it too fast, but as I say, if you're interested in doing some further training in this, we're doing a workshop in December, 2 days workshop, and delighted to come along. We're delighted to meet you. Okay, so maybe we leave it at that for today. Okay, and thank you for listening. Thank you for getting taken in this. It's terrific to see people interested in this subject. And Manik, thank you for your comment. Very much appreciated. So we're going to leave it at that for today, guys. I'm going to sign off and wish you the best of luck. And hopefully you got something from the lecture. Okay, bye-bye.